Protecting kids from porn. We're going to talk about the legislation that we heard about this session, the different lawsuits across the country, but also the path forward. So you'll notice this is a perfect example of what can be done. So a lot of our graphics, you see the word porn, we have the hashtag sign for the O. That wasn't just us being polite. Because if we made a graphic with the word porn in it and put it on Facebook, it gets instantly shadow banned. That's how diligent these different systems can be in protecting kids. Perfect little example. To promote this event, we had to change the words. So let's first of all talk about the problem facing us. This is from a recent study. 73% of the 13 to 17-year-olds have seen it. Honestly, we could probably assume that's a whole lot higher. Because how many of them, you ask a teenager, hey, have you ever seen this? No. 54% before age 13. A good chunk of them before age 10. And as you can see, the average age of exposure is 11 and 12. If the average is 11 and 12, it tells you the lowest is dramatically lower. Previous generations maybe thought you could wait till the kid was 11 or 12 or 14 to talk about these topics. As you can see, a dramatic amount of today's kids have already been exposed. 58% of teens said their first exposure was accidental. Keep this in mind when we see some of the Supreme Court findings later. Make a little bookmark of that. 45% said it gave them helpful information about sex. Exactly. 80% of teens said they had seen what appears to be rape, choking, or someone in pain. Half of them said this was helpful as I'm figuring out what sex is. And most of them say, yep, and we've seen this. Is that how we should be teaching today's kids? The top 5 websites. That's the 10 is supposed to be a 1 month of traffic. So just the top 5 websites. Again, there's hundreds, maybe even thousands. I don't know how many sites there are. There's probably thousands of websites with this material on, okay? Take just the top 5. Every month, 10 billion visits. More annual profit than professional baseball, basketball, football combined. So again, when we're talking about legislation, keep that in mind. Because when we hear things like, well, this is a burden for us to try to protect kids, or you're putting burdens in the way for us to produce our, you're making more than football, baseball, basketball combined. I don't want to hear about it. Forensic examiner, that testimony. These are some of the real stories. Those are the statistics. Here's what we heard this year at the Capitol. A forensic examiner that came and helped with the bill and helped testimony. She shared a few stories. She speaks all across the state to students in schools all across the state. She says usually if they're meeting in a gym or something like that, the younger kids are in front, kind of ranking age to the back. Between the front row is kindergarten. Kindergartner shot his hand up, didn't even look for questions. What do you do if people have shown you porn and they won't stop? Kindergartner. Another person at the Capitol, again, I'm trying to be vague to protect, respect privacy here. Another person at the Capitol, he's a bus driver, said the kids are watching on the back of the buses, he can't stop them. The forensic examiner talks to kids regularly who fight over who gets to sit beside the kids who have the smartphones who are showing them. The other day, I don't think we have any little kids in the room, aside from young enough to not understand. Little kid who goes up to his mom, Mom, what's anal? He goes, well, where did you get that? He goes, well, they talk about it on the bus, and all the kids fight because the one boy gets to watch it on his phone, but I don't know why they're fighting about it, because I don't know what it is. It's incredibly prevalent. She told the story of an interview they had where they just did a sting where they advertised falsely young children for sex. And they busted this guy, brought him in for the interview, because during the sting, they were reaching out, trying to get the person to agree to come to buy these services. And when he's talking with who he thought was the pimp, said also, you can watch if you want. And so in the interview, they asked this person, okay, I just gotta ask, why did you mention that we could watch if drugs, for example, you need more and more and more to get the high, right? With porn, you need different. You need something you haven't seen before, something you haven't experienced before. So this kid had gone through everything he could see online, and then this person had gone through all the different experiences he could get a hold of, and it wasn't doing it for him anymore. So we figured, well, if I rent this young girl and have the pimp watch me, maybe that would get my body excited. This person was 24. It's a pretty short lifetime because of how fast the addiction can affect kids. Because what most people don't know is it's harder to break than most hard drugs. Most people know, like if you're a meth addict, you've got a hard road to climb. If you can hook a kid, or really any age, it's that same struggle to get out. That's the prevalence of what we're talking about today. Again, most of us in this room, we don't even want to say the P word. Because we're more respectable than that, we're more polite. We don't talk about it in every conversation. Kids talk about it all the time because they see it all the time, or their friends look at it all the time, and they know they're trying to avoid it. So let's look at some previous attempts, because this is what you're going to hear a lot about in the discussions with the legislation and the efforts and things like that. So this last legislative session, we had the age verification legislation, right? Saying that these websites need to put some sort of system in place to keep kids off. It was not the first time it's been tried. The last time this was a major effort back in 1999, and the Ashcroft and Reno cases you'll see there, the ACLU was on the other side of it. So they said, okay, we need to implement age verification systems. This works its way up through the court, gets to the Supreme Court. And this is some things that the Supreme Court found. Because what we have to talk about is, first of all, porn is a form of speech protected by the First Amendment, just like the freedom of speech. It shouldn't be that way, but that's where the current jurisprudence lies. The court has recognized this is a form of speech, and you can't make it illegal, and you can't restrict consenting adults from, speaking it or seeing it. So that's what's at play here is, again, that should be overruled, and some of the justices talk about that. But it's speech, which means strict scrutiny is applied whenever the government wants to take action. So we all have rights given to us by God, respected by government. There are different levels of scrutiny that the government needs to justify if they're going to take action. So for a lot of our key constitutional rights, the clear ones, like freedom of speech, or the right to bear arms, or the freedom of religion, the government has to pass strict scrutiny if they're going to do anything. Here's what that means. Let's pretend that this is the sphere of freedom of speech. We're trying to visualize the concepts, right? So in this circle, this is freedom of speech, and all of us walking around, walking freely. If the government is going to put up any barriers whatsoever, they have to pass and prove strict scrutiny, which means they have to show two things. We have a compelling government interest to do this, and the option we chose was the least restrictive means. Those little roadblocks, those are the smallest ones we could find to accomplish this goal. They have to prove it's a compelling government interest, and they have to prove that they chose the least restrictive option. The best example of this, it's a real friendly one to understand. Take the Amish. I believe the case was in Pennsylvania. Cars on the road need to be lit, right? You gotta have headlights, gotta have taillights, otherwise you can see some red and blues in your rear view. Why? To keep everybody safe. So they went to the Amish and they said, you guys need to light your buggies for everybody's safety, compelling government interests. They said that violates our religion. Again, religion is strict scrutiny is applied. So in court, in the back and forth, here's what they came to. Rather than adding wires and lights and batteries and stators to the buggies, violating their religion, or the tenet of their religion that prohibits technology, they came to the compromise, what about those orange flashing triangles? Now the Amish I'm sure still feel like that's kind of still a step too far towards technology, but it's a very respectful compromise, because they could stick a chunk of metal in the back of the buggy without feeling like they were totally violating their religion in the same way that rewiring the whole thing with lights would be. Because the government had a compelling interest, we've got to keep everybody safe on the roads, including you. So they found the least restrictive option. those orange triangles, rather than rewiring the whole body. That background is important as we get into this Ashcroft and Reno case, because what they found was, yes, there's a clear, compelling government interest to protect kids from this, but as of now, we have not fulfilled least restrictive means. They said individual device filters are the lesser restrictive means, and they said just because there's a compelling government interest in protecting kids, and that's very important, you can't sweep with a broad brush and prohibit adults from getting to it. So if you're putting barriers up to keep adults from seeing it, just because you're trying to protect kids doesn't justify your action. So they said filters are better, but this isn't the least restrictive option. Therefore, strict scrutiny is not fulfilled, and the age verification measures are not valid. Keep in mind, this came from 1999, was before the Supreme Court in 2004. What's important to remember about court cases is that they can only look at the exact facts that are in front of them. So in 2004, they had to look at the 1999 facts as they were. So here are some of the things they wrote in 2004 about the 1999 facts about the internet and filters. Filters are more effective than age verification requirements. So that's the better way to do this. It's just going to be simply more effective. If everybody would just put one in, we can protect all the kids. The internet is not as invasive as radio or television. It's just not. Users seldom encounter content by accident, and odds are slim that a user would come across a sexually explicit website by accident. In 1999, that might have been true. How many of you went to our scorecard, our legislative scorecard, 2 years ago during the election? Anybody have a rude awakening 2 years ago? It was hacked and went to a porn site. Yeah. So any of you who 2 years ago went to look at our legislative scorecard, you were sent right to a porn site. They regularly purchase ads that look like something else, so kids will click them and they get there. Or they'll change words slightly, so that a kid, maybe if they misspell a regular word, they'll accidentally end up on the site. They, again, we saw the billions and billions of dollars that they're bringing in. They've got money to be creative with their advertising. Kids accidentally see this all the time. Because the new phrase is, your kid may not be looking for the industry, but the industry is looking for them. So when they wrote their opinion in 2004, saying that age verification is unconstitutional, they wrote in pieces of it that as we were writing this in 2004, it's probably outdated, but we can't do anything about it because we have to look at the facts as they were in 1999. From 1999 to today, 25 years, has the internet changed just slightly? Yeah. So that's what brings us to the current push for age verification legislation across the United States. South Dakota, we were trying to be state number 9. So if we rewind, back to January, 8 states have passed this. As I said, it's time to re-look at Ashcroft and Reno. It looks like it's a paper tiger. The internet has changed so much that we now can pass strict scrutiny. 1257 is introduced, and we're trying to use state number 9. What the bill did was, well, first of all, let's talk about just the background of who drafted it. South Dakota Catholic Conference, and you heard from Michael 3 minutes ago. South Dakota Family Voice. 2 legislators that helped write it were both attorneys. And we had outside help from American Principles Project and the Center for Women in America. Those bottom 2 are nationwide, essentially the top voices on this topic right now. They connected us with the top legal minds who are analyzing the court cases and all the different pieces of legislation. And that's how the legislation was drafted. It did 4 things, again, simplified. Required that the websites implement a system, like they do with sports betting or other things like that. Implement some sort of age verification system to keep kids off. Protect the privacy of any data you receive. If you don't do either of those, then the other 2 come in. Cause of action by the parents, which cause of action is a fancy word that means you can sue. So if a kid accidentally gets onto a website, or a parent notices that this website isn't even trying, they could find an attorney and file a suit. Same for somebody who had their data that wasn't protected. A general John Doe user went to a website, verified his age, a year later there's a leak. Well, his privacy is supposed to be protected. He has rights to sue as well. So So those were the 4 basic pieces of what the legislation did. And even let's talk about implementing the system today compared to the 1999 cases. Back in 99, I don't know the details of what those age verification systems look like, but it probably was something like you scan your ID into a database in the porn site and they keep a picture of your ID or keep record of it. Today, it's not like that at all. Even the systems themselves have dramatically improved. What these companies would do is if you're in the industry, you want to produce this content, you contract with a third-party verification company. And there's a bunch of them across the US. I've talked with a couple of them. They say these transactions or these verifications happen literally millions of times every day across the US. Where you go to this third-party site, and there's multiple different ways of doing it. I think the most unique one is I think they can even do like biometric scans of your face, which I don't think is super common yet. But there's unlimited number of ways that you can verify your identity. Maybe you're scanning your ID, maybe you're entering other information to this third party. Their entire job is to verify people and protect their identity. Because you can see how you'd be a little bit skeptical of, even if you wanted to go look at this content, you don't necessarily trust the website. If you're going to post that stuff, what else are you going to do about people? Be a third-party person that you just contract with, again, for pennies, and you saw their profits. Implement some sort of age verification system to try and keep kids off. Because we didn't think that we could stop every child from ever seeing this. That would be totally unreasonable. Nor did we think that this was a be-all, end-all. Just the first step. Basic first step. And if you talk to people in sports betting states, they kind of shrug their shoulders like, yeah, it totally makes sense. Because the sports betting industry uses stuff like this already to verify the kid's age. So let's talk about what happened at the Capitol. So you saw, again, the people who were involved in the drafting, checked with the Attorney General's office. They didn't have concerns. So we move forward. It goes through the House, flies through, 62 to 6. Not even hardly any controversy. Bipartisan support goes to the Senate. Up until basically the night before, so we're checking with people, not really seeing any warning signs. A couple of the senators on the committee have committed, yeah, I'm a solid yes, makes sense. A couple of them have said, hey, I haven't really looked at it super close, but I think we're good. I'm going to make a testimony tomorrow. So that's the evening before. That morning, we get to committee, and things have flipped. One senator, gotta give him credit, gave us a notice right before the committee started that, hey, I've gotten information. I know I told you I'm a yes, but I just gotta let you know, I've gotta give you testimony, I think I've gotten information now. Gotta give him at least credit for giving me the heads up. So then the committee gets to discussion and voting. One senator brings up several concerns. One of them is the private right of action for parents. He says we need to have the government enforcing laws, not parents. They didn't want parents to be able to sue the industry. So we had an amendment drafted as a compromise. If that's going to stick the bill up, okay, we can take that out as a compromise to get it through. So then the only enforcement would be that the Attorney General can investigate. It's a compromise we were willing to make. We drafted the amendment. It was in the system. Nobody took it. A couple other concerns were, the one just didn't think it would be effective. Another senator was very obviously just against the idea as a whole. So we get to the vote. A couple of the senators that had given their indications, gave a brief explanation, and then the swing vote was voted no without any explanation. So that's when, shortly after that, the game playing started. So if you're familiar with what's called a smoke out, when a bill dies in committee, you can push it to the floor and force a vote. So the one senator who had said, hey, he said, if you take the parents' thing out, I'll be with you on the smoke out. Okay, one vote's already flipped, so we started working the smoke out. Because we're going to try and force this to the floor with the compromise of that, take the parents' cause of action out. We're willing to compromise there if you guys are willing to bring this to the floor. That was the deal. So we're working it and working and working it. And we get to, they finally call the smoke out vote, which is we need 1/3 of the body to physically stand out of their chairs. We're one vote short. So one other person, again, like last second, stands up. Because they said, we just want you to have the debate. We want you to move forward. So we just barely get our 1/3. It's forced to the floor. But if you're actually going to debate it and vote on it, you need to add it to the calendar. That requires half to vote yes. So we're like, okay, we just barely, by the skin of our teeth, got the smoke out. How are we going to get to half? They start calling the roll call for calendaring, and it was unanimous. How did we barely squeak by a smoke out, and then they calendar unanimous? We were kind of surprised. The sponsor pitches the bill, gives the explanation. Another senator stands up with an amendment, moves it, it's seconded, hardly any debate, they vote on it, voice vote. What the amendment did was deleted everything and inserted a phrase about studying it over the summer. Because the legislature does summer studies, so they wanted to now make this a law about summer studies. So what had happened was a lot of people were getting upset that the bill had died in committee, and legislators were hearing back that maybe they messed up. So when this got to the floor the following week, they didn't want to vote directly against the bill. So they completely rewrote the thing to be one sentence of, we should study this over the summer. The motion to do that was a voice vote, so there's no record of who said, yes, we should cut the bill. But now, same bill number, modified bill name, completely different language. They can say they voted yes. And if you go to the safe system, you'll see they voted yes. There was actually only one no vote, which is one of our friends. He was just so kicked off at what happened that he couldn't bring himself to vote yes, and I get it. So now you've got a different version from the Senate. It goes back to the House. The House says, no, we don't agree with that. Let's do conference committee. The conference committee refuses to compromise. Goes back to the Senate floor for the final vote, final last chance after if we want to try again and compromise. The irony is the last vote that the Senate took to finally kill the bill for end and done is the same day that Indiana passed the bill, and they beat us to be state number 9. Since then, 5 other states have passed it. So now 14 states have passed this. And one thing we heard a lot from the different senators who just weren't ready for this, they said, well, let's just wait for the courts to decide. Let's just punt it off and wait. Well, since then, the 5th Circuit has upheld the Texas bill and said, yes, this is constitutional. The porn industry appealed it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court denied cert, which means they refused to hear the case. Now, that doesn't prove anything. They could have a dozen different reasons for why they refused to hear the case, but it often suggests that they believe the 5th Circuit was right. Because they're not going to take a case just to say, yep, you're right, we wasted all this time just to give you a thumbs up. So ultimately, we need the Supreme Court to overturn Ashcroft and Reno. So what's the best way to get there? Well, continuing to pass bills, continuing to send lawsuits up the chain is how we get to the Supreme Court. Because there's something else we've got to talk about. Let's say that some of those senators who are worried about losing in court, first of all, they regularly said, well, the ACLU is going to sue us and we'll just fund the lawyers. The ACLU hasn't sued in any of these states. It's the porn industry. So let's say they were right. We go in front of a federal judge with this bill, again, assuming it would have passed, and we lose. And then we go up to circuit court, and then we lose. And again, it's lose all the way up. And then you've got a loss in our circuit and a win in this circuit, and it's a mixed bag. That's called a circuit court split, which is one of the primary motivators for the Supreme Court to take up a case. Because if everybody's getting it right, again, why would they take time just to give everybody a pat on the back? But if it's a key issue, like obscenity and freedom of speech, and the districts are disagreed, or the circuits are disagreed, then they're more likely to take the case. So for example, the 9th Circuit is generally joked as the most liberal, the nutty 9th. Let's say somebody in the 9th, again, they pass the bill, they go to court, up, all the way, they lose all the way. Is that inherently a bad thing? Not if it motivates the Supreme Court to recognize that split, take the case, and finally overturn Ashcroft and Reno. So that's what we're looking at with these bills. It's time for another round. It's time to bring the issue back. We could have been state number 9. Now I don't even know if we could be 15, because who knows, what's next. Or how many states will pass it before next legislative session. But that's what we're looking at for next legislative session, because it's time to bring it back up. It's time to take another try. And I think a lot of representatives and senators have heard from people back home that it's time to do this. So we'll be working on legislation over the summer. It's important that we continue talking with legislators, talking with community members, explaining the summary of what we've heard today, that no, it actually it's time to discuss again if this is constitutional. Because that's what we heard a lot of. Oh, it's just not constitutional. Well, if you want to believe the ACLU as they're trying to defend their own case that's 25 years outdated, then sure, you could go with that messaging that it's unconstitutional. But try to explain to me why it doesn't pass strict scrutiny anymore, which now you guys know about. We can now see how unreasonable it is to assume that nobody accidentally finds this. Filters would be more effective anyways. We know those things are totally irrelevant now and totally not true. So that's the background of the legislation, the different lawsuits. We have a couple minutes here, going to be finished a few minutes early if there's any questions. But that's an overview of, first of all, the legislation, how it came about, how it went through the session. But one final note on also what's coming up next. That summer study bill, that was just a total gameplay because they didn't want to vote no, well, the bill died. But then afterwards, they appointed a regular summer study through the normal channels. And they put a variety of legislators on the summer study. The first meeting was actually when we had our Sioux Falls lunch event. So the summer study bill was a total, to be honest, it was political game planning and it was a joke. This summer study, they could make it legitimate, they can do the research, they could bring legislation, so it's yet to be seen if this one, if they're just playing games or if they actually want to study it. So we would love for them to take a deep dive, choose if they want to work with us, if they want to work with somebody else, no skin off our neck. The one was total game planning, this other one has a real chance to take a deep dive, to really study the issue, and if they want to bring legislation, awesome. We can be working on stuff as well, and we'll be glad to work with any of